Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healthy Communities presentation for Special Olympics. I'm very, very excited to be here and to provide this lecture for you and all of this content. Before we really jump into it, I want to highlight the fact that we all have something in common. We all, deep down to our core, care about our athletes, care about the athletes of Special Olympics and their performance, both in sport and also in life. What we want to do today is we want to give you a little bit more information on how we can really bridge these together. A lot of those of you who are listening today are coaches in a specific sport, but we're going to go into a lot of extra detail on how we can heighten your practice to help your athletes get to that next level in sport and that next level in their life, in their health. In order to talk about this lecture, really, who am I? Who are we? And what are we going to talk about today? So my name is Zachary Weber, and I'm a physiotherapist who works at Concordia Physiosport. Concordia Physiosport is part of a larger group, CBI, the Canadian Back Institute, and that's a health group that works across Canada. A few years back, they paired up with Special Olympics to address some of these gaps that exist in healthcare accessibility for the athletes of Special Olympics, for individuals with intellectual disabilities. And so we partnered up in order to bridge this gap. One of the main initiatives that we did and what we want to talk about today is the creation of a CBI manual for coaches. We're going to go into a lot more detail about what's included in this manual. But the practical side of what we've also done on top of giving this to you in one nice clear book is that we've also started sending some kinesiologists and physiotherapists as consultants to some of your practices, always with the goal of increasing the quality of your practice, increasing the quality of sport care and attention that your athletes are getting, and increasing the health advice that they're getting. So I'm Zachary Weber, but I am only one of a much, much larger team. Pour celles qui aimeraient entendre cette lecture en français, on aurait une autre kinésiologue, Christine, qui va donner ça en français dans à peu près une semaine. So if you want to listen to this in French, in about 1 week, we will have another one of our clinicians, a kinesiologist, Kristen, who's giving this in French. If we want to really talk about what our goals are for today, I want to give you a little bit more of my thought process. I want to give you a little bit more of what I look for when I come to a practice, how I want to bring in my interventions. And why do I want to do this? Because I want to give you the tools to start thinking like me. I want you to help to start to recognize your role as an advocate, as a coach for healthy lifestyles for your athletes. So I want to give you an understanding of what's really in our curriculum in this guide. I want to help you be able to educate your athletes on these healthy lifestyle habits, both physical and mental. And we're going to talk about how those two really have to go hand in hand. And I want you to be able to run a training session with your athletes using time efficiently to teach all the different parts of the curriculum. In fact, this all boils down to the concept that a sport practice doesn't necessarily have to be just playing that sport. There are so many different factors that we can go into and that we want you to go into with your athletes to continue to push them to improve their performance in their sport and in their day-to-day lives. So listen to what we have to say, focus. As we go along, think of some questions, think of how this applies to you and how you can then apply it to your athletes. And at the end, we will have a question and answer period. And so this is the agenda for what we're going to do. I'm going to start off by outlining what's in the manual, giving you the education that you need in order to give it to your athletes. As we go along, we're going to try to throw in some helpful tips and tricks in order to put it into the session. But this is all going to culminate in our practical application, where we try to give you some tools and some strategies in order to keep track of the interventions that you're bringing in and give you a little bit more guidance on how to structure the practice, both physically, a warm-up, training, and cool down, but also how to take all of the parts of the physical activity, nutrition, stress, sleep, and health and hygiene considerations and bringing that into your practice. Again, we'll have a moderator who's going to be helping out to answer some question and answers at the end of this lecture. So let's jump into it. The manual starts off talking about physical activity. And what I want to bring up to you right now is to understand that physical activity has many parts to it. It's not just exercise. Physical activity has aspects of strength, which is things that are intended to build muscle, has aspects of flexibility, that which tries to increase mobility, has aerobic capacity, that which tries to increase cardiorespiratory function, how your heart and your lungs breathe and function, and balance, that which gives you stability. Now recognize, oftentimes we think about going to the gym just means going to get stronger, but we have to take in all of these considerations in order to have the body perform maximally. We'll go into a lot more information about this as well as we go through our lecture. But what I want you to recognize now is that physical activity is more than just a sport. And this is what we want you to take and reflect it in your practice. Going to a soccer practice is not just playing soccer the whole time, but it's also including the stretches that they need in order to get the proper kicking motion, the balance that they need in order to plant and then kick off of it, that running around, that endurance that they need, and of course, the strength in order to get the power. These all come together. But if we're going to talk about physical activity, how much should we be telling our athletes that they need to be getting? Well, the recommended amount is either 150 minutes of moderate physical activity or 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity each week. Might seem like a lot, but it doesn't have to be done at one time. So long as we're doing physical activity for bouts of 10 minutes or more, then that is enough to start to build up our repertoire towards this 150 or 75. Bouts of at least 10 minutes. And we're going to go into more detail as well on the next slide about what these different activities might be. Included, though, what we do want to emphasize, although before I mentioned that physical activity is more than just strength, strength is very important. Our muscles are what keep us strong, keep us moving, give us the power to control and to exert anything that we want to do. So strength training itself should be included at least 2 times a week. But as you see at the bottom of the slide, and as any healthcare professional should be telling you, the more physical active that one can be, the better off they will be. So let's go into what we mean by moderate physical activity and vigorous physical activity. If we look at the objective signs, looking at an individual and saying, are they exerting themselves or not? A moderate physical activity would be when somebody starts to sweat a little bit and they start to breathe a little bit harder, but they're still able to hold a conversation. So the examples are brisk walking, cycling, aerobics, vacuuming, and gardening. Now, what I want to bring your attention to, physical activity is not just sport. There's vacuuming and gardening. Those are activities of daily living. So encourage your athletes to be active both in and outside of their sport practice. If your athlete is a child who lives at home, talk to the parents and say, hey, you should encourage your child to help you out around the house. See if they want to do some of the gardening with you. All of these are different ways in order to increase the minutes of physical activity that an individual is doing throughout the day. Our goal is get people off the couch, off the computer, stop sitting down, stand up, and start moving. If we want to be a little bit more intense and vigorous activity is when we start to breathe harder, sweat more, and start to have difficulty having a conversation. Not difficulty out of distress, but difficulty simply meaning that we're breathing instead of talking. And so these are activities such as running, hiking, or as we see at the bottom, heavy gardening, like digging. Again, recognize physical activity can be in sport and out of sport. And we're going to encourage you throughout the rest of this lecture and any time that we see you, start thinking about how you can motivate your athletes to take on these principles of physical activity and soon to come nutrition, stress, and sleep, and take these principles and put it into their day-to-day lives. Find the right time to have these conversations with your athletes. We encourage you to have these conversations with your athletes. We motivate you to, and that's going to help bring them to that next level. That's the objective side. If we want to talk about subjective slide, I personally love this slide over here. Subjective means having a person report their own intensity. And so we really want to have our athletes or any individual understand the level of exertion that they are currently putting out. And I love this slide because the image on the left shows everything. What we see is we see a number scale, 1 through 10, to recognize if it's very easy or very hard. We have words associated with it, such as easy or just getting hard or very, very hard or I'm going to stop. Or we have classifications on the top if we want to make things a little bit more broad. These are different options in order to have conversations with your athletes, to have them understand these concepts in the various ways that they are most in tune to learning. Numbers, words, and in fact, we even have images, such that if your athlete is one who doesn't necessarily take in number scales or words, but really likes images, they can maybe map some of their sensations onto the image. Why are we doing this with them? Let's take the example of the endurance athlete. The endurance athlete, they have a long race ahead of them. We want to start to teach them to take more ownership, more autonomy in their function so that they can then perform throughout the whole race. Start to have these conversations, expose your athletes to an image like this, and at the start of a practice or the start of a race, ask them, hey, what level are you at? Point to the image where you feel you are, and try to guide them to keep their efforts in that right range where you want them to be, so that they can then perform throughout the whole race. Now, I forgot to mention this, but we could see on the slide, as in a previous slide, throughout the lecture, there's going to be a few stars on the slide. And these are really our take-home messages. And so as I just emphasized, use images like this to teach your athletes to understand energy conservation so that they can learn to help apply it to themselves in their sport and succeed and excel. When it comes to strength programs, we said we wanted to be at least 2 times a week. What that means is if your practice is only 1 time a week, well, first off, include a strength training aspect into your program. But second off, we need to have a routine for the athletes that they can then take this and do it again at home. Foster autonomy. Recognize that your role as a coach is more than just being there at that practice. You have an amazing, amazing role in these athletes' lives. So take on this advocacy role for a healthy lifestyle and try to find ways in order to motivate them to continue outside of your practice. More exercises are going to be discussed at the practical aspect of this lecture. Now, I tend to talk not fairly quickly, but there's a lot of information that we want to get to. If you're watching this as a recording, feel free to pause and digest this as needed. I guess talking about digestion, it's an interesting segue to move into nutrition. Nutrition is our second aspect that we want to talk to you about. And again, why is it so important to talk about nutrition when typically we might think of ourselves as only a sport and physical activity coach? Well, food is the fuel of the body. Without the right nutrition, the body cannot perform properly. It needs its energy in order to move, in order to regenerate. And we know that healthy diet choices are also predicting factors for trying to avoid, I'll start over. The unhealthy diet choices are predicting factors for other illnesses such as heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and cancer. Poor eating habits and sedentary lifestyle contribute to poorer health. And so we want to be able to encourage our athletes to eat better so they could be their best self, again, in their sport and outside as well. The tips and tricks that we have for you, and the main guide that we want you to know about is the Canada Food Guide, which is revised recently. So here we have the most revised version, and you see that fruits and vegetables is supposed to take up half of the plate. Protein foods, a quarter, whole grains, a quarter, and water is the beverage of choice. If we go a little bit into some of the history of nutrition, a lot of times we used to think about meats being the protein sources. But there are a lot of considerations of what's in those meats, fatty meats, like steaks or bacon or hamburgers. What the Canada Food Guide is starting to move towards is talking about these leaner protein sources that you can get the same nutritional benefits from diverse foods. That when we're talking about our carbs, we want them to be those whole grains that have all of the extra nutrients in them. And so on this slide over here, we have the list of all of these main take-home points from the Canada Nutrition Guides. But what we want to highlight, as I have with the star over here, is we have a website, a nutrition guide, specialolympics.ca, that has a whole bunch of recipes, a whole bunch of information that you can use as resources to learn for yourself or even to give to your athletes to help them increase their competency when it comes to healthy food choices. The strategies that you can help them bring into play are talking to them about getting involved in their grocery shopping and their meal planning. The more that somebody can plan ahead, the more they have control. If we just let our day-to-day go by and we go to the grocery store very whimsically, well, we might forget about a meal. And then we're stuck scrambling, often going for fast food or TV dinners that happen to be in the freezer. The more we could plan, the more we could prepare, the healthier choices we're going to have. The more that we make our own food, the more we know what's in it, the healthier the food is going to be. We then say one of the main things to do with our athletes is to also have them recognize that there is a delay in actually feeling full. What that means is you can eat, but there's still about a 10-minute delay before the systems in your stomach communicate with your brain to tell you that it's full and that it's satiated and that you don't have to eat anymore. So to avoid some of this, we tell everybody that we should be eating slowly, such that you're not stuffing your face and eating all this food and continuing to eat before your brain gets these messages that you're full. Alternatively, don't eat with distractions. Distractions will always lead to the person going back and taking more and more snacks from that snack bowl without realizing. Having this mindful experience when it comes to eating is one of the best ways to slow down and appreciate what you're eating. Eating with family, getting involved with the cooking process adds the social aspect to it as well. So here are our helpful strategies, tips and tricks. We want you to take some of this information, and maybe it doesn't apply to all of your athletes. Maybe it doesn't map on exactly to the clientele that you work with. But take that, use your skills, your creativity, and your knowledge to take this and transfer it over to what you do with your athletes. Also, on this website, there are other resources and other aspects where there's games that you could even play. And so if you want to be creative, and here's one of the things that we do encourage you, is that instead of having conversations in your practice, if that's not going to be the most effective way of communicating this information with your athletes, try to find a game that fits in with your practice. Such as if you're a softball coach, well, throwing is very important. So we encourage you to either take some cartons, a water bottle and a Coke bottle, put them up onto a platform and have people throw at the healthier option. What are they doing? They're practicing their throwing and they're learning at the same time. For soccer athletes, well, they could kick aside different trashes of, clean trashes of healthy or unhealthy food choices. Kick things to the good side or the bad side. Basketball players can throw it into little buckets. Or athletics, run to the healthier choice. Instead of an I Spy game, you could say, run to the healthier choice of the orange crunchy food and have an image of a carrot and a Cheeto. Educating and training at the same time marries these two topics in a time-efficient manner. Think about some of these strategies, have fun with it, bring it to your practice. We encourage you. And so that is where we stand with nutrition. Let's go a little bit more into stress management. Now, stress is very, very natural, and it's very important to have this conversation as well. Why? How is it going to bring your athlete's performance to that next level? Well, our body has to be a well-oiled machine. Our body has to have everything working together. It's not just an engine, an engine, which is the strength. It's not just the gasoline, which is the nutrition, but it's also the computers in the car that help to make sure everything communicates properly. So we want to encourage you to have conversations about stress with your athletes. Help them realize that it is normal and that stress can actually be a good thing when learned to be managed properly. We're going to go into more of these strategies. But that first step is understanding what stress looks like for yourself and help your athletes recognize it for themselves. Stress can manifest in many different ways. It can manifest within the body, physically, in physical sensations such as a headache or dizziness or nausea. It can manifest in our feelings and our emotions. So anxiety or fear, some anger, frustration, overwhelmed. That is some psychological process of how we're processing what's going on in our body and our interaction with the environment. The mind aspect, or the cognition, the cognitive function. This is how we perceive our environment, how we interact with our environment. So poor concentration, forgetfulness, having trouble making decisions, these are signs of a body that is being overworked and not handling stress in an efficient manner. And finally, a physical demonstration and outlet for some of our stress can be seen in our behaviors, such as fidgeting, nail biting, crying, or self-harm. These are all important factors to recognize, for you to recognize and map onto your athletes, and to help them recognize and map onto their own sensations. Because only once we can recognize that we're stressed, then we could start talking about how to manage it. There's different techniques to manage it. And what I typically say is the absolute best one is what we see number 3 on the list. It's reach out to friends and family for support. Now, if your athletes don't necessarily have anything, here's where, again, we come back to you and your role. You have a key role in these athletes' lives. Be that resource for them if they feel stressed. Be that person that they can talk to. If your athlete is a little bit more introverted, there are other things that we can do to teach them, such as positive self-talk. I can do it. I've trained for this. I've had this before. I can get through it again. Finding these self-motivating aspects are the one way that they could then say, okay, I'm able to get over this. If we want to find the best time to talk to our athletes, if that's a question that's coming through your mind about stress management, well, it's always easy to frame it within a competition, because we all know that sensation of being stressed before or the night before a big game, a big competition, because these thoughts of, I don't know if I can do it, or trying to project what's going to happen, that's a lot of emotions that come up. So positive self-talk is one of those key ways that you could get over it, or not get over it, sorry, but use it to your advantage. Use it to motivate you and take your performance to that next level. Stress can be a good thing if used properly. Finally, or not finally, what I want to also bring up is the last 3. I know I'm going through this list in a weird order, but the last 3, we have good sleep routine, exercise regularly, and a balanced diet. These are shown to manage stress properly, or to have a positive effect on stress management. Notice that these 3 plus stress management are those 4 main topics of what we have in this manual. They all have to come together And we encourage you to find these ways to come together in your practice. Again, lots of ways to bring it up and lots of strategies that we have for you. When it comes to stress management, one of the best times to do it is at the end of the practice when everybody's cooling down and everybody is stretching. You could then go into some of these techniques to relax. Because the more that you can practice these stress management techniques before you're stressed, the easier it is for you to put it into practice when you are stressed. Start to master these techniques first and use it easily when it's needed. So we have our relaxation and our deep breathing techniques. These techniques are going to be very important because fundamentally, to its core, our physiology, our body cannot be both stressed and relaxed at the same time. So if we could recognize that our stress is creeping up and we have techniques to bring in relaxation, those two are going to work as a seesaw or a balance. The more we could then skew into relaxation, the more that stress is going to start to fade from the body. So what do we have as our relaxation techniques, our breathing techniques? There's three main ones that we present for you here in this PowerPoint. The first one over here is our deep breathing. Some people refer to it as belly breathing. What it is that we want our athletes to breathe deep into the stomach. And one of the best ways, or easiest ways, or the ways that I like to teach it, is to put one hand onto the stomach, one hand onto the top of the chest. And we instruct anybody who we're talking to about breathing techniques to breathe deep into their stomach such that only their abdomen moves, only their bottom hand lifts up and not their top hand. That prioritizes air into the bottom of the lungs, into the diaphragm. The diaphragm is that big muscle, that respiratory muscle, that's most efficient at bringing in air, and it's very much at the bottom of the lungs, and it goes down and pushes into the stomach. The more we can use our diaphragm and less of our upper chest muscles and our neck muscles, the more efficient we're going to be at bringing in air, the more efficient we're going to be, and less energy we're going to use in trying to breathe. So putting one hand onto the belly, one hand onto the chest, breathing in, breathing out, only having the bottom hand breathe. If we want to really fill the entire lungs up, the way I want you to think about it is that we're not having the air come in through the nose, then through the windpipe, then to the top of the chest, and then to the bottom. Think of it rather as a bucket that we're filling with water. And the water drips in, but it starts at the bottom and it fills upwards. When you breathe in, start with the air at the bottom and fill the lungs going upwards, and then let it drain. The alternative breathing technique that we encourage you to explore with your athletes is box breathing, or sometimes referred to as breathing by fours. What we see at the bottom of the slide is an image. And this box breathing technique simply is breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 4 seconds, breathing out for 4 seconds, and holding or waiting for 4 seconds before restarting. What you're doing in this case is you're mastering your breath. You're bringing some of your attention from your thoughts, maybe some of these stressful negative thoughts that are running through your mind, and focusing on a very physical sensation. And you're getting control of it. So if you're breathing fast, this is going to help slow it down. So try it with me. What we're going to do, we're going to start and we're going to breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, breathe out 2, 3, 4, wait 2, 3, 4, breathe in 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, breathe out 2, 3, 4, wait 2, 3, 4. Hopefully you tried that with me. I'll let everybody get back to their normal breathing. Now, what you could see is that it takes some thought process, some concentration to actually get in tune with this. During the stretching aspect of your time with your athletes, I encourage you, practice these breathing techniques such that when somebody is stressed, they could then use it. They have it equipped in their toolbox of strategies. The final and the third one that we have here is pursed lip breathing. Now this one involves breathing in through the nose and out slowly through pursed lips. Imagine like you're blowing a kiss. So it's in through the nose, out through the pursed lips. This one has very interesting physiology to it and the way that mechanics to it, the way it works in the body. It's very helpful for individuals who are having the starts of a panic attack or some aspect relating to asthma, where it's going to create a change in pressure within the windpipe and help that air move out in a nice controlled manner. So if somebody's breathing really fast, rapid from the top, trying to get them to slow it down through this pursed lip breathing might be one of those more effective ways to actually use the body to slow it down for them. That is our main tips for breathing. Practice them when you're not stressed, to use them when you are. Practice them in a quiet area. Breathe deep with the belly and be patient. It does take time. Recognize that not all approaches work for everybody. Everybody has their own preferences. So play around with what works for each individual, with each athlete, and see how it goes from there. All we can do is have you take ownership, take this information, bring it to your athletes, and then find the best way for them to take it into their practice outside of your practice. This is a very nice transition into sleep, because sleep and stress often will go together. They're both very calming aspects, both very calming parts of the education aspect that we want to bring to you. And so this one also fits very well into that conversation that you could have at the end of your training when everybody is starting to calm down. Sleep is of paramount importance because that's when our body starts to regenerate. The most regenerate, starts to heal, it starts to consolidate memory. So the most important thing about sleep is not just the amount of sleep, but the quality of sleep. Our sleep has natural cycles to it. So what happens is we move through phases of light, deep, and rapid eye movement and REM, and each one has its own benefits. So if an athlete is sleeping for 8 hours, even if that's what we recommend for them, it is still possible that they might come to you, still have aspects of lethargy, of tired all the time, of lack of motivation. It's possible that their quality of sleep isn't really at that par or where we really would hope that it can be. So we still encourage you to go into conversations of sleep habits and sleep hygiene, even if the athlete is reporting that they're getting the proper amount of sleep. Look for their behaviors and use that as a sign for you to understand, and then take that as advantage to educate your athletes. So here's what we have as a few strategies for how to improve sleep. We want to encourage everybody to have a regular sleep schedule. Okay? Go to sleep and wake up at the same time. Try to avoid light sources at the time of bed. Our bodies have circadian rhythms. They go through ups and downs and normal flows in our energy levels. And we also have receptors that pick up on these things in order to help have our bodies match the environment. So when our eyes pick up light sources, it tells our brain it's daytime, it's time to wake up, and changes our neuroreceptors and gets us a little bit more alert. If we're trying to go to sleep, this is counterintuitive. So minimizing the light sources is one great way of starting to improve the quality of sleep. Finally, what I want to emphasize as well goes towards that star at the bottom, that we want you to recognize where your practice fits into the day of the athlete. And this has two aspects to it. One of them is recognize that if your athlete is working all day, goes straight to practice, has to take public transit home, which takes them an hour, then they have to prepare their dinner, which maybe is going to have to be a TV dinner because they didn't prepare for it before, cue nutrition conversation, but then they might be also going to sleep very, very late. Help guide them in some sort of strategies in order to make this more efficient and improve their sleep. The alternative, or the contrary side of this, what if your practice is itself late in the day and the athlete is expected to go to sleep soon after? We want to give the athletes a chance to calm down their adrenaline, their heightened alert state from sport. We want to reduce activity level 60 to 90 minutes before bed. So what this means is when you get to your end of your practice, if you know your athletes are going to be going home and going to sleep soon after, make sure that you take the time to do a proper cool down. And we'll go into more information on what that means. But take that time to help them slow their heart rate, breathe, relax, and then enter or transition from this high energy state to this I'm going to be going to sleep soon state. Taking on these roles, taking on these practices is going to help your athletes improve the quality of their sleep. If somebody has trouble falling asleep, oftentimes there's negative thoughts associated with this. So we want to always frame things in the positive. If they say that I didn't sleep a wink last night, have them recognize this positive self-talk that I can do it. I'm going to fall asleep sooner or later. Or if they're talking about that they're dreading their bedtime, help them learn these new techniques, help them learn some ownership, and help them see that they can make some changes. So those are our strategies when it comes to sleep. And now that brings us to those 4 main topics of the manual. What we have over here is we wanted to present a few more pieces of information and insight, or at least a few more talking points that we want to encourage you to talk to your athletes about. So here we have our hygiene and our healthy considerations section. When it comes to hygiene, talk to your athletes about washing their hands, about showering. Always welcome these into your conversations. Look and identify if somebody may need a little bit more education in this source, and invite yourself to have these conversations with your athletes. When you're exercising outdoors, a whole bunch of other considerations. Sunscreen, paramount important. Very, very important to have your athletes know and develop their own routines. The more that you can build a routine for them, the more they could then adopt it as their own and transfer it into their own practices and give them more autonomy. Hydration, always important. It harkens back to that nutrition section, and even more important when it comes to exercising outdoor in a hot environment. As a healthcare professional, smoking cessation is usually a very true subject that we want to broach with our athletes. We want to try to offer them chances to decrease the amount of cigarettes that they are taking. Again, this conversation may not be in our wheelhouse, but what we do have is we do have some tools that can help to skew away from it. Keeping athletes busy, or if you yourself happen to be a smoker, not smoking in front of the practice or in front of the athletes are all ways that we can try to project this positive health image to the athletes that they can then hopefully map onto their own choices and their own behaviors. The last point that we have here is some other considerations about following certain biometrics. We have had some stories, there are some coaches that do take some blood pressure measurements of their athletes. There are some coaches that are helping their athletes talk about weight management and are taking some measurements of the weights. What we want to emphasize is that it's great to have a log of these, but it's important to also not be obsessive about it. These are ways that we can track a health progression. We have to notice that a lot of our clients may not fit into the norms of standard deviations. They have different health considerations. The best way, rather than looking at cross-sectionally, how does one person relate to others, if we could look longitudinally how they relate to themselves across time, we get a lot of information from that type of log. And so if blood pressure measurements are a possibility or scales are a possibility at your practice, taking the occasional measurement may be very, very helpful for the athletes, for us, myself as a physiotherapist or the kinesiologist who come to your practices, or even for the doctors that they go to for their annual checkup. This is amazing information for any healthcare professional to have. And you now have a role and the ability to bring out some more of this information, help this communication between the athlete and their healthcare professionals. So all of this really segues very, very nicely into our practical part, the tools and the strategies to keep track that the interventions and the education that we're giving is actually being integrated into the lives of the athlete. We have over here, and also inside the manual, is an activity log. And here's an example one. What we can do is we could start to give pieces of paper or charts or tasks to the athletes such that they can now take more ownership of their activities in their day-to-day. This can be a very, very motivating tool in order to have athletes recognize what they're doing. So having this, giving that education to your athletes and giving them a task to take home, well, that is going to do wonders. This is just an example, however. Again, name of the game in Special Olympics is adapting. Every athlete is going to respond differently. Some can fill this out very easily. Others have challenge with numbers, with writing or literacy. Find the way that works best for them. They could use stickers. They could draw an image of what they've done. Keeping this log motivates them to continue a habit. Keeping this log shows you if they're in fact following through. Be creative, find ways to keep track of what's going on and to show that your intervention is being bought in by the athlete and gives you tools to continue to go back to it. Having a common chart like this is going to be great at having you follow and encourage and welcome these conversations with your athletes. The last one was all about physical activity. This one is another example that's very global because what it also does is it talks about nutrition, talks about water. Now, I encourage you to also include sleep, or if somebody's goal is to lose weight, have a daily weight measurement in there. This is going to help any healthcare professional understand what's happening in this athlete's lives. How are you going to do it? Well, take advantage of your team as motivators. You yourself are an advocate for your athletes, but you also have the volunteers that are helping you at your practice. You have the family members, the caretakers, or any friends who may be cohabitating with your athletes. Build that social experience around these conversations. That's how it's going to be helped to be brought to that next level. If you want, from time to time, do a healthy eating month where every time you come, every athlete is going to have their own personal challenge. Rather than talking about the competitions of Special Olympics where you're going against regions, against different teams, have them challenge themselves if that's one way that they can buy into this a little bit more. This own personal challenge leads to own personal gratification. So encourage you to explore all these different ways to encourage your athletes to buy into these practices. I'll use this as the time, and I'll come back to it later because this is one of our most important things. When is the time to make these changes? Well, the time to make all of these changes and interventions are when we have a natural pause in seasons. Take this time to think about all of this information that I'm giving you. Take this time to start thinking about the creative aspects of nutrition games or stress management practices, and start to build it into your routine from the get-go. We're going to talk now about how to build the routine. Again, let's use the example of the team or the practice where athletes come and they just expect to be playing right away. Well, what we want to encourage you right now is to pivot a little bit more into these healthy lifestyle habits, practices, and conversations, such that the athlete is now going to learn to come to practice and not expect to be playing their sport for the entire time. They will be playing their sport, but they will also be complementing it with different drills, with different conversations, and the appropriate warm up and cool down. We encourage you to take on this physical structure of a practice or outline of a practice that we're about to present to you. And when it comes time to starting up the season, start it from the get-go, such that it becomes this routine, the athletes accept it, and when different healthcare professionals come as consultants, well, the job is already done for us. We don't need to come in and start making these major changes. We could help to tweak, refine, add to, but we're not necessarily trying to take away some of this precious time of playing a game with the athletes to have these other really, really important and crucial conversations and activities. These diverse training practices are really what's going to help the athlete excel. And again, I always go back to it. These abilities to excel are both in the sport and in their activities of daily life afterwards. So here we see the main structure of a practice, where there's warm-up, intended to increase the heart rate and have the bodies start to be moving, getting ready for the activities and for the training. We then have our sport-specific drills. We're going to work on skills and strategies and game situations. These are tools that are going to help the athlete learn specific things a lot more structured, that when it comes to the free gameplay, their bodies and their skills and their abilities are going to naturally transfer over as default. Okay? We also want to encourage to have water breaks throughout the session. And what that does is it creates a nice barrier in the session where you can do a drill and then you can have a water break and then you could play. There's a pause there. And I really want to emphasize this idea of pauses, because that's where a lot of our interventions are going to be able to come in. Finally, we have our cool down afterwards to help to bring us back to relaxation. So warm up, we want to increase our heart rate. We want to increase our muscle readiness readiness to play. We want to increase its reactivity. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that with some dynamic stretches. These dynamic stretches are movements to be done before sport, where you're moving through a full range of motion in a controlled manner. This is different than a sustained stretch where you're just holding it. So examples of this are leg swings and arm circles. What we want you to do is we want you to integrate it into your routine, regardless of if it's a team sport where it might be easy or an individual sport where it might be hard. Start off with a group huddle, everybody together, and go into these warm-up practices. We want you to focus on the main muscle groups that are involved. The main muscle groups, we always want to focus on neck, shoulder, hips, wrist, ankles. Those are very mobile joints, ones that we need to be really primed and ready for sport. Once we have those muscles woken up a little bit, we want to get that heart rate moving a little bit more. So you could also go through these movements and increase the tempo. High knees, you're lifting up, and then you're faster and faster and faster. That heart starts to beat. Once we have our muscles warmed up and our heart beating a little bit faster, let's prime them for the movements that they're going to need. Let's wake up these motor synergies, these patterns that works well for the individual sports. Somebody like who does bowling needs a lot of single leg balance. So something like dynamic lunges or single leg deadlifts wakes up these muscle patterns that they need. Somebody like basketball, where they do layups, single leg hops, wakes up the muscles that they need. Then these transfer over into sports. In the manual, you're going to see that there are images like this. We have a whole bunch of these different icons and pictos to help guide you through these specific warm-ups for your different sports. We want you to recognize that there are many different sports in Special Olympics Quebec, and our athletes might be doing many different ones as well. What's important to realize is that we can't necessarily give a presentation that's going to be specific to each one. We're trying our best to be diverse and give you a skeleton that you can then hopefully map on your experiences onto it, and then take that next step, applying it to your practices. So when we go into our sport-specific drills, I want you to try to think of where your sport fits in. What does your athlete need in order to do best at what they're being asked to do in a competition? Think of the physical activity that we mentioned before: strength, flexibility, aerobic capacity, and balance and/or reaction time. Some sports are naturally skewed more towards one than another, and I have them listed in that same order: powerlifting for strength, rhythmic gymnastics needs lots of flexibility, somebody who's doing long distance or running needs that aerobic capacity, figure skating needs balance as they do these techniques. We also have our team sports, which has that added layer of communication from one person to the other. We have sports that are more specific to each of these different aspects, but we also have sports that have all of them that need to be considered. I'll make the argument even that even the powerlifter needs to have good balance, needs to have good aerobic capacity, proper breathing techniques as they go through. So even though yours is skewed towards one, take in factors of the others and still apply them during your practice. Some examples of things to look for, questions to ask. Does your sport require rapid change of directions like cutting, acceleration, deceleration? If so, try to have some obstacle courses, some relay races where they're forced to move in these different directions. No, this is not time spent playing soccer or basketball. I recognize that. But the more that they can develop their agility in these structured games, the more that they can apply it when they have their competition. Think of your sport if it has hand-eye coordination. Here's where you can then break out and have certain aspects of, let's go back to those healthy nutrition choices. Can we throw balls at the right choice? Can we kick things from one side to the other? You're developing your drills and your skills. You're developing your skills while also learning at the same time, marrying those two, physical and healthy habits, both together. Other sports require dissociation between the arms and the legs, where you need to move the arm but keep the rest of the body stable. Figure skating, an excellent example, where you need to have this coordination. If this is your sport, try to pick up on what's needed and how can we foster that. I can see sometimes when athletes are throwing, they throw with the same arm and leg in front. Now that's not the most efficient pattern, but it's hard for people to break this pattern and go opposite, contralateral, right arm, left leg. So if we recognize this, let's include some drills. Maybe in our warm-up, when we do our high knees, we're going to take our right hand and touch our left knee, left hand touch our right knee, and go from there in order to break these single side patterns and foster these more complex ones. Again, there's also always that aspect of strength training. And in the booklet, on top of the warm-up and the cool down, we have images of sport-specific strength training. Find the time to put these into your practice as well. We have them for all the different sports, what they need and what's best. Important to notice is, yes, these are some exercises that are specific to the sport, but if you want to add push-ups into there, if you want to add jumping jacks into there, go for it. Those are always exercises that are excellent for any sport. And again, some of your athletes play multiple sports. Take-home message, build a routine that they can then apply themselves at home. This is the foundation. Add whatever you want on top of it. Use your creative liberties. How to put it into your practice takes a little bit more skill or thought process. What we want you to start to think, is your sport a team sport or individual? Find those natural pauses in your training program or the downtimes where you could start to intervene. So if the athletes arrive all together, but there's a lot of downtime waiting before they could start to have these conversations. Go up to your athlete and say, hey, didn't we talk about your meal prepping? Well, what did you eat for dinner last night? Or You were telling me you were really stressed last time, and we worked on our breathing patterns, our breathing habits, relaxation techniques. How did that go? Welcome these conversations in these natural pauses. Another great time is hydration breaks or water breaks. Everybody's typically sitting down. Instead of having everybody broken out into different places, foster these conversations. Hydration, talk about water. Talk about how important it is to drink 5 glasses a day. At the end of the day, at the end of the program, you have your cool down. As we've mentioned before, excellent time to broach the topic of stress and sleep and to teach more of these stretching habits. If you want a little bit more guidance, a little bit more examples of how to bring in the sport-specific drills rather than just the conversations, well, here we have a few listed for you. For example, if your sport is basketball, soccer, or hockey, or something similar, well, you could start to think about after any time there's a goal or a foul, again, a natural pause, have one team determine an exercise that the other team has to do. This reinforces the education that you gave them about proper exercises, and it helps give them more exposure to these exercises. Track and field, if you have different stations, but there's a line, do jumping jacks while you're waiting. Keep that heart rate active. Use these times. Rather than waiting down in between turns for bowling, encourage them to move, do some activities. Or, bowling is a very social sport, encourage conversations. If we want, have conversations about nutrition. If we want to bring a game into it, create a bingo board with different healthy choices or a connect the dots, some sort of game that they can play while waiting. So they're not just sitting down, listening to their iPhone or playing a game. All of these are excellent ways and just the starting point where we want you to start to develop your creative skills and bringing in fun, new, diverse games that's going to bring in this education about physical activity, nutrition, stress, sleep, and all of these other exercises that we have in the manual. Bring them into your practice. Have fun with it. We then get to our cool down, the last part of the practice. And this is where, as we mentioned, we want to bring that heart rate down, take away from that sympathetic, that fight or flight nervous system, where the heart rate is really going and we're really alert, especially if your practice is at the end of the day. Help the athletes calm down and relax. Talk about stress relief. Show them certain stretches. The more that you can do in the practice, the more times you repeat things, the more you build it into a routine, the more they could then use that in their routine outside of practice as well. We have in our manual, we have our global and our general and global sustained stretches for the major muscle groups. Look at those. That's a great starting point. Once the athletes understand the stretches, well, then they could do them themselves at home. And so here we have our example of some of those stretches. I've spoken a lot. There's a lot of information in this course. It's all written down in the manual, but the thought process is really where the money is. And there is some challenges to it. What I want to say is that here is the information, but it is only a skeleton. I've mentioned before, the main word of Special Olympics is oftentimes referring to adaptability. Can we tailor this to this person, to this individual, to this sport? You know your athletes best and how to take what we've mentioned today, all that we've spoken about, all that we've learned, and apply it to your athletes, either as a whole or to each individual. We want to encourage you to start to build these habits. Create the habits in the practice such that the athletes can then use it in their day-to-day afterwards. And how are we going to create these habits? When are we going to create these habits? Well, we want you to start doing that right away, right now, at any chance where you can, where there's a natural pause in the season, such that when people come back, it's ready to go. And it's new, but this is what the new is. And it's not a strong contrast from what you were doing just the week before. Doing that, one, it's going to bring in all this extra information. However you do it, that is excellent. There's no wrong answer. Doesn't have to fit this cookie cutter mold. Take this information, build on it. So you're going to start that right from the get-go. You're going to bring in this information. And then if a healthcare professional or a consultant wants to come in, you want to have a consultant come in, well, our job is that much easier because we don't necessarily have to make these major changes. We'll help to fine tune. We'll help to answer any questions. We'll help to really build this up to really heighten that experience for the athlete. The goal is to get that athlete to perform the best that they can in their sport and have them learn through sport how to take these skills and apply it to their lives outside of sport. With any questions, with any ideas, wanting any help, please never hesitate to contact your regional offices. Should you have any questions, we would love to be there. We want to be here for you, and we're going to be here for you. So we encourage you, take a look at this manual. In this slide over here, included in this PowerPoint, we do have our resources for you. And finally, what we're going to do is I'm going to take this time to really, truly say thank you for listening. I hope that this was informational for you, informative, and you appreciated it. I'm sure there may be many questions. You can always reach out through any resources you have with Special Olympics, or if there's a moderator on the session, feel free to ask, and they should be able to answer any of your questions. Thank you for listening. Have an amazing rest of your day. Good luck with all of your practices to come. Thank you.